Well, hello there, and welcome back to another episode of Help My Business is Growing, a podcast where we explore how to grow and build a business that is healthy and sustainable. I'm your host, Kathy Svatina, a fractional CFO and a founder of Newcastle Finance, a company where we believe that everything that you do in your business will eventually end up in your finances. And to get to healthy finances is to have a healthy business. How do you get there? Well, this is where this podcast comes in to help. Have you ever wondered why some business names are more memorable than others? Some stick with you while the others are completely forgettable. This is something that I've been pondering for a while now. And it's interesting how a simple name change in a business can sometimes make or break it, because the business name carries an incredible weight and it leaves this lasting impression that can either draw the customers in or confuse them or maybe even repel them. And it's just so fascinating to me. So, we're going to be talking about this in this episode. We're going to be talking about what are some of the secrets to a name that clicks. Like, is there anything like that that we can use in our own businesses? Maybe there's a framework. So, we're going to be exploring that. And how do you choose the right name to drive the business forward? And what's in a name? And could it be the key to a success? Like, what are some of the things that we need to look for when we are picking a name for the business? Whether it might be a business name, whether it might be a name for a product or a name for a service. So we're going to be looking at that. As a quick reminder, all of the episodes on this podcast, including this one, come with timestamps for the topics that we're going to be discussing. And each one has its own blog post as well with the transcript. So if you want to read versus listen, you have that option too. And you can find all the links in this episode show notes. My guest today is Alexandra Watkins. She is a leading and outspoken authority on brand names with buzz. For nearly 20 years, she and her naming firm, Eat My Words, have created love at first sight brand names for countless companies, including Amazon, Coca-Cola, Disney, Twitter, and Google. Her breakthrough creativity book, Hello, My Name is Awesome, How to Create Brand Names That Stick, was named a top 10 marketing book by Inc. magazine. Her name hall of fame includes the Wendy's Baconator, Nito Robotic Vacuum, Burger King's Mac and Cheetos, Spanish language school Gringo Lingo, and a frozen yogurt franchise, Spoon Me. Join us. Alexandra, welcome to Help My Business is Growing podcast.
Thank you, Kathy. It's so nice to be here.
Hey, it's so nice to have you here. You know, every time I pick up a product or I hear about a new business, the name of it always gets me curious. It's almost like a cover of the book. It sets the mood and it kind of draws you in. But, you know, some of the names immediately click while the others, well, they kind of leave your head scratching, right? And you have found a formula that creates the names that click. And you even wrote about it in your book, Hello, Awesome, How to Create Brand Names That Stick. And I've been working my way through it. It's been super helpful and I highly recommend it because I'm also launching a service and I'm trying to name it and I'm trying to name it right so that it actually clicks versus scratching people's heads, right? So first I want to ask you, what are some of the most common mistakes that businesses are making and what are they doing wrong when they're trying to name things? Are there any common things that you see happening all the time?
Yeah, there's a lot of mistakes that people make that are easily corrected. One is, well, oftentimes when people are coming up with names, they're starting in the wrong place. They are looking for available domain names, and that's the last thing that we do. Nobody expects you to own an exact match domain name anymore. You're perfectly fine adding a modifier word. So, like, my website is eatmywords.com, but if we wanted to be Eat My Words naming or Eat My Words brand names, Eat My Words names, it's fine to add any word like that, and it will help you with your search engine optimization as well if you have those keywords in your name. But another really big mistake that people make is spelling their name a way that's not an intuitive way to spell it. So I did a podcast yesterday where this guy was asking me about the name Krispy Kreme, and like that's a great example of like a name that it's just so that, you know, look, we all love Krispy Kreme donuts. I think most people do, and the names, the K for crispy and cream, it's silly, and maybe that's their brand personality. But yeah, anytime your name looks like a typo, or your name shouldn't look like a typo. So a lot of people do these misspellings to get an available domain name,
Mhm.
but it might save you some money, but ultimately it's not going to save you time, and it's going to be painful for your customers, painful for you. There's going to be the email bounce backs. People aren't going to be able to find you. You're going to say your name to Siri and, like, find this, and she's not going to be able to. So, yeah, there's all kinds of problems. And if you have your own personal name, is like Kathy, your name, I mean, obviously Kathy can be spelled two different ways, and I'm sure
Yep.
people do spell it wrong. That's not a egregious example or anything, but Spatina, did I
Yep.
say it right? Yeah, I'm sure people butcher your last name all the time, right?
They do. Yes. They even butcher my first name too. Like Kathy, like it could be anything. Yeah. So a lot of the mistakes that people usually make with I spell my name with a K, they would make it with a C. So that's really easy. Or
Right.
they would do it with Kathie. I've seen that. So you'd be surprised. I think it's pretty easy, but you'd be surprised that people do end up misspelling it.
Yeah, I am always surprised. Yeah, it's rare that I meet someone that has a name that's not misspelled ever. My friend Jim Fox, he's like the only guy I know. No one's ever misspelled his name. Although I suppose Fox could have two X's on it. I want people to know that when you're naming something, think about all the pain associated with your own personal name, whether it's hard for people to spell, or hard to pronounce, or hard for people to remember. And names are hard for people to remember, which is why we wear name tags, or, we've all tried, oh, what's that person's name? And like, so think of your own personal name when you're naming your brand or your product or your service, and don't give whatever you're naming, don't give it any of those disadvantages, because just get in touch with how painful it is or frustrating it is for you. Nobody wants to like pronounce your name wrong. It's painful for you and them. So, yeah, just try to remove all of the friction points from your name.
Yeah, and I see some people trying to be like really creative with the names, and they come up with like a couple of the same type of letters in a sequence, and it just gets so hard. It really gets hard to not just write it, but also to remember it. And then
Yeah.
you always have to remember, okay, did I spell it this right? Did I? It's usually what people end up doing is, at least what I do, is I just Google it. I see, can I find that person? Can I not find that person? So I can definitely relate to, how painful it can be if you're not naming this right. So you have a process about naming it. And I know it's a science, but it's definitely an art. How did you come about this process to begin with? And you lay it out very well in the book, but let's talk about the process that you came up with. How did you figure this out?
Well, my process is more of a name evaluation filter, I think, and it's called the Smile and Scratch test. And it's based on my philosophy that a name should make you smile instead of scratch your head. And SMILE is an acronym for the 5 qualities that make a name strong. And Scratch is an acronym for when to scratch it off the list because it makes people scratch their head. So there's 7 there. And so, yeah, when you're familiar with the process and you can run your names through it, it will really help you keep the winners and ditch the losers.
And let's talk about the smile and scratch process. So the smile is the one, it's the winners, and the scratch is the
Right. So
losers.
SMILE, the S in SMILE stands for suggestive. You want your name to suggest something positive about what your brand is or does. And metaphorical names are good examples of names that are suggestive. So, for instance, Amazon suggests something very large, and that's what Jeff Bezos was going for when he named it. The M stands for memorable. Everyone wants a memorable name, but so few people know what how do you even figure out if something is memorable? And by the way, I think naming is an art, not a science, there's science involved in some of the things that I talk about. So with memorable, what we know is that things are easier for people to remember if they already exist in our knowledge base.
Mhm.
So, for instance, the bike lock company named Kryptonite. We all know Kryptonite from Superman.
Yep.
And that Kryptonite repels Superman. So when Kryptonite, the bike lock company, was naming itself, I'm sure they figured out, oh, this is something that's, if it's repelling Superman, then we're going to evoke that Kryptonite locks are repelling bike thieves, right? They're really strong and powerful. So that's a great example of a name that's memorable because we already know it versus something that's unfamiliar to us
Yep.
that we don't have anything to grasp onto in our brain. And so we're going to have to work harder at it. So that's, try to come up with like the name of my company, Eat My Words. That's a phrase that people already know. So that makes it easier to remember. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So you're always looking at it, what you're trying to find is a naming convention. Does it have a context associated with it and what that context is, correct?
Yeah. Then the I in S.M.I.L.E stands for imagery. It helps if your name, when people hear it or see it, if they can picture something in their head when that happens, because it's going to make it easier for them to remember later on. We named a GPS for dogs Retriever. And of course, when people hear retriever, they can picture golden retriever, again, making it easier to remember. The L in S.M.I.L.E stands for legs, and legs means your name lends itself to a theme. And this is just the very best thing you can have for your name because you can really extend your brand. An example I have is, Eat My Words, right? We're a service industry. We have a, menu of services. Our blog is called The Kitchen Sink. So, the food and beverage theme. We have, packages like supermarket special, the whole enchilada. So those are examples of how you could extend your brand. Jimmy Buffett, who I'm sure a lot of people know,
Yep.
he lent his name. He didn't lend it. I'm sure he charged a lot of money for it. Smart guy, very successful guy. He has these retirement communities, and they're called Latitude Margaritaville, right? And the Jimmy Buffett, right, his fan base are called parrot heads. We all know the song Margaritaville. I mean, it's a way of life, right? So smart to do these 55 plus retirement communities targeted at people that, are already in his audience. Like, who wouldn't want to retire at Latitude Margaritaville, right?
True.
So they have names like the street names. I mean, it's so brilliant. The street names are like Flip Flop Court and Tiki Terrace. Yeah, that's an example of legs. E in S.M.I.L.E stands for emotional, and it's really important that your name makes an emotional connection with people or it's going to go right over their head. And a really great way to make a connection with someone is to make them smile, right? Because that's when, it's going to resonate with someone and they don't have to laugh, but just give them a smile in their mind. Like when you hear a name like Retriever for the GPS for dogs, that's going to make you smile. So those are the names that people, tweet and repeat.
So that should be the goal for the name, obviously, Smile. But how do you get there? Like, what is the process to get there? Because obviously, if you're not used to that, how do you come up with something that will fit that smile criteria? I mean, do you just kind of brainstorm? Do you open a dictionary? I mean,
Yeah,
what do you do?
all of those. So people start brainstorming, but they're just staring at a blank piece of paper brainstorming, or they're, you're sitting around, right? We're all in our conference rooms. So you're sitting in a white room staring at a whiteboard and expecting colorful names to materialize.
True.
And that's not how names happen. That's not how good names happen because you're limited to the knowledge base in that room. So whoever's around the conference table, whatever's in their brain is all they know. Where I believe the best place to brainstorm is on the internet because there's so many resources there. Whether you're looking at, an online thesaurus or a dictionary or, rhyming dictionary, those are good places to brainstorm. You can use ChatGPT. I think ChatGPT is good for like kicking off a brainstorming, but it's not going to get you to the final name. And it's also not going to help you determine which is the best name. I mean, that's where I come in and that's where my expertise is really valuable. But another thing that people do is they're just kind of throwing things at the wall, seeing what sticks, but they don't have a roadmap. So what we do is we give everyone a creative brief to complete. And in the brief, we're going to find out about your company, your target audience, what's the tone and personality of your brand, and what do you want people to feel when they come in contact with your name? Do you want them to feel happy, or, like a sense of trust has been instilled? Do you want them to feel empowered, powerful? We name a lot of wellness, fitness products. So anything like that, anything that can help inform like the mind of the customer, like what are we trying to get into, that will help. And then like in the brief, we also have an acid test sentence where you're showing us how the name would be used in a sentence. So then we have something to compare it to when we're coming up with names. But yeah, we look at all kinds of things. We look at stock photo libraries for ideas because those are all tagged with keywords. So if we were naming something fast, like a new microprocessor, we might Google, fast, or we might go to, iStock photo or Shutterstock and type in fast, and we'll see all kinds of pictures of things that are fast. So imagine we were naming a fast running shoe. Maybe that's where the name Puma came from. So if you think of like, these metaphorical names, and those are my favorite kind of names because I think they're familiar to people and they can communicate a lot. So yeah, those are some of the things that we do.
And how long does that process typically take you? Like, for example, if someone says, I need a name and we need to have a name for this product or service, how long does that usually take? And what is, for you, obviously, it would take, I'm assuming it will take shorter than someone who has not done this so many times. But what is the acceptable level of time that it should take you? Obviously, you shouldn't take it for years to do this, but what's the most like acceptable time frame for this?
For us, we like to spend a couple weeks working on the first round of names, then get feedback on those, and then do a second round, which takes like 2 more weeks. So it depends, and we can accelerate things. But I can't tell you how many times a client has come to us that's in a hurry, but then all of a sudden, like, they're like, oh no, we need to push the meeting out a week. We're busy. So, things happen, and that's fine. We're dealing with that right now, but we can wait. We always have other projects going on. But we come up with a lot of names internally, and then I kind of toss out the ones that I don't think are strong enough, and we get the list down to 100. Maybe if you're in a super saturated trademark class, we will give you more names just because we want you to be able to have a lot to choose from, because a lot will get knocked out in trademarking. We don't knock out all the names. We don't run everything through trademarking before we show you the names, because we want you to be able to react to something. So for instance, we were naming a reverse mortgage product for Wells Fargo, and a name that they really liked on our list was Golden Ladder. When we ran Golden Ladder through trademarking, it got knocked out. However, because we knew they liked the word golden, we were able to ideate around that. We came up with the name Golden Bridge, and ultimately that became the name of the reverse mortgage product. So that's our process: is bunch of names in the first round. Let's see what you react to, because people sometimes don't know what they want until they see it. So, we do all those names. You pick what you want to go to trademarking. We'll screen those, then we'll come back. And if you want more, we'll do more. And then based on those results, we'll look at like, okay, what cleared trademarking? And then how can we help you rank those? And then you go on and bring them to your council.
So I guess the process would be come up with as many as you can, and
Yeah.
then as you're going down the list, you pick the favorites. And after that, it would be to figure out whether there's a copyright or anything on them that
A
already
trademark.
exists.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And it's really important to trademark screen your names, trademark screen them in the beginning, just to make sure there's no immediate knockout, really obvious knockout conflict of interest. So then you're not paying money to an attorney to go down, like pursue a name that we can tell very quickly. No, what was I doing yesterday? We're working with some Navy SEALs right now, naming some autonomous surface drones. And yeah, one of the names that they like, it was too close to another name, and we saw Raytheon is who registered the trademark. We're like, yeah, don't even go there, right? So yeah, we're just able to determine that. But then it's really important to protect your brand with the trademark, and it's never too late if you haven't trademarked your brand or your product names. It's never too late to do that. We know someone who just after 11 years just got the trademark on their name. So yeah, you can do it. And especially if you've been using it a long time at that point, then you can show, yes, no, this is then you have a much stronger case. So yeah, that's and I have great trademark resources if anyone needs a resource for that.
And with trademarks, it's better late than never.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we actually just had an episode about the trademarks and the copyright.
Oh,
So if you're
who
interested,
was it with? Was it with Joey Vitale?
no, it was Aaron Austin, and we had a really great conversations about how do you actually do that in a small business space. So if you're interested in that episode, definitely go check it out because if you've been using this and it's might be worth it to trademark it. Her advice was if you feeling like if someone was to use the same word or the same type of naming convention and you'd be completely like devastated and it would make a significant impact on your business, then it's time to do it. Like you got to do this.
Yeah. The last thing you want, because people don't really think that through, but the one I think about is rollerblade, right? So they had to really go in and protect their brand because everyone was calling their inline skates rollerblade, and rollerblade makes a super high quality product. And there was a lot of companies coming in making really inferior products compared to theirs, but they were being called rollerblades, And so rollerblade didn't want these other companies calling or anybody else calling them rollerblades. So, and that just became this like generic term, and that's called genericide when something becomes just like a common term for things.
Mhm.
So they had to protect their brand and be, rollerblade inline skates. Kimberly Clark did it with Kleenex, Kleenex tissues, Xerox photocopiers.
Yep.
They were the first really big one because we would all say, oh, just make a Xerox. And then they realized like every copier, people are just referring to it as a Xerox. Kimberly Clark also, they own the trademark to onesies. So if you have a baby onesie that's not a Kimberly Clark onesie, it's technically called a baby jumpsuit. And if you're using onesie, like on eBay, if you're selling onesie, and I'm making the quotation marks. If you're just listening and not watching the video, I'm making the air quotes. If you're selling onesies, but they're not technically Kimberly Clark onesies, they'll find you and shut you down. Not shut you down, but you'll get a cease and desist. And like no business owner wants to get a cease and desist letter. And like there's so many sad stories of businesses that have been, I don't know if they've just been operating blindly or just kind of thinking, oh, it's okay. And this is also a really common mistake where our clients will say, oh, it's okay. I don't care. It doesn't matter if you care. It matters what the patent trademark office thinks. And they are here to protect consumers, right? So like with a consumer wants to buy, the rollerblade brand because they
Mhm.
want a superior quality product. But if somebody's confused thinking something else, oh, that's made by Rollerblade, but it's not, that's going to be bad for the consumer. Maybe something dangerous. So yeah, it's important. It's all done for consumer protection more than brand protection, but you need to protect your brand.
So we talked about Smile. Let's talk about Scratch. So that's something that you scratch off the list because it makes you scratch your head, and it's it's a scratching head type of situation with the naming that you obviously want to avoid. So what does Scratch stand for?
The S in Scratch stands for spelling challenge. And we talked about that, right? Like with Krispy Kreme. The first C in Scratch stands for copycat. And look, nobody likes a copycat, right? Like as kids, right? Copycat. Like nobody likes a copycat. Why be somebody else when you can be yourself? So when you are a copycat, when somebody sees your name, like the example I always use is Pinkberry is a kind of a very well known frozen yogurt franchise, and there are so many Pinkberry ripoffs. There's Yoberry, Blissberry, Yumberry, Coolberry. I mean, I've found like 25 of them. And when somebody sees a name like that, the first thing they do is they roll their eyes and like, oh, they just copied Pinkberry, right? And like really, do you want that to be somebody's like first thing they think about you is they're a copycat? No. So don't be a copycat because one, people roll their eyes, they won't respect you. You're shows a lack of originality. You're riding on someone's coattails, but also it opens you up to trademark infringement. So be really careful there.
Yeah.
The R in Scratch stands for restrictive, and that's where your name locks you in and limits future growth. So, an example is there's a web app called Hotel Tonight. And when it started out, you could get a hotel for the night. So, it was where hotels they sell off their unrented rooms at a discount, right? So, as a consumer, you can just get a last minute deal. And it was great in the beginning, but then they decided to expand. So now Hotel Tonight, you can reserve hotels up to 365 days in advance. So the name Hotel Tonight is really limited now, right?
Yeah.
And a better name. It's so when you're starting out naming something, look into your crystal ball and imagine what you might be a couple years down the line. And if you start to feel your business is changing and you're very different now, or you've outgrown your name, change your name. It's never too late to change your name. So, Hotel Tonight, I think a better name for them would have been Get a Room because
I like that.
I think the original, you know, when you're getting a hotel just for the night, you know, wink, wink, like, yeah, get a room, right? Like, so I think it would have been fun and playful. And then Get a Room would have scaled to 365 days a year. So, yeah, that's really think it through. And there's countless examples, you know, the company Fast Signs, and it started out as a sign, they made signs, but their tagline for years now has been more than fast, more than signs. Like, that's a waste of a tagline. Just change the business name. And we recently renamed a bank that was more than 100 years old, and their original name was First National Bank of Syracuse, which would be okay if they were in
Mhm.
Syracuse, New York. But they were based in Syracuse, Kansas, which is a tiny little town an hour from the closest airport. And look, people in Kansas, they don't want to do business with New York companies. They want to do business with local companies, right? So, and it was an award-winning regional bank. They were really mavericks, and the name was kind of stale for them. They wanted something that
Yeah.
was more modern and fresh. And their tagline at First National Bank of Syracuse was helping dreams come true. So we leaned into that and we rebranded them Dream First. So it's much more aspirational, it's positive and upbeat. It still has the word first in there, but it's nice. It's very different for a bank. It's very fresh.
Yeah, it sounds very modern for a bank. It's
Yeah.
versus, this old school type of first bank of whatever. So I think we're at A.
Yeah, the A stands for annoying, and annoying means that your name frustrates customers. You know, maybe it's spelled backwards. That's frustrating. Maybe it has a numeral in it, right? So if your business name was Coast to Coast, and the coast 2 was the numeral 2, you would forever have to spell that out for people. Oh, yeah, it's, Amy at coasttocoast.com. Well, but the 2 is the numeral 2. Like, anytime you're having to explain your name, you are essentially apologizing for it, and that devalues your brand.
Yeah. And T?
T stands for tame, and you can't afford for your name to be tame and be a wallflower because you need to stand out in a sea of sameness and in a crowded marketplace, whether you're a B2B company or a consumer, direct to consumer. There's just so much noise, right? All the online stuff, all the apps. I mean, look at how many ways there are for us to get messages, right? And like all the distractions we have. So you want your name to be something that just jumps off the page at people.
So is there such a thing as like you want it to be witty and something that jumps off the page, but is there a line? Like, how far can you push it?
Well, in business to business, you want to be clear. If you're in a creative business or you're trying to attract cool clients, then I think it's okay to be a little more fun. Eat my words. Obviously, we're a creative firm, so our name shows off our creativity. And even though we have a playful name, and we started out naming things that make people fat and drunk. I named the Wendy's Baconator. That's my claim to fame. I said it to someone the other day who had never heard of the Baconator, and he said, "The bacon hater?" Like, oh my gosh, a focus group. That could have easily been killed in a focus group if someone said that. So yes, creative services can have cool names, but we worked with naming a law firm. The founding partner's name is Layla Benajamali, and she knew that her name would be, hard for people to spell, pronounce, and remember. So they worked with startups in the San Francisco Bay Area, helping them get their foundational documents. And the name that we gave them was Bedrock. And it's, Bedrock. And I think the tagline is where it all begins, which is so great. So what happened is after they changed their name to Bedrock, and I write about this in my book, Hello, My Name is Awesome. After they changed the name to Bedrock, she said that they started attracting, their business went up and they started attracting the type of clients that they wanted to work with. And that's the magic of having a name that fits your brand personality. So like Eat My Words, we might not be for everyone, but you know what? We've been for, Google, Twitter, Amazon, big companies have hired us. So the name, they want to work with creative people. And I think with Bedrock, they were attracting, the young startup crowd, and it was perfect for them.
That's awesome. Yeah. So we've talked about T is for tame. What about C? What does C stands for?
The second C in Scratch stands for curse of knowledge. And that's where you know what it means, but you forget that other people don't know what it means. A lot of people do this and a good way to think about this is foreign. Is your name a foreign word or expression? Sur la table, the kitchen store. It looks like sur la table. And how would you know it was, unless you speak French, you wouldn't know that it was sur la table because it looks like sur la table, right?
Yep.
And we don't, I'm the first to admit, I don't know how I figured it out, but I used to work in a building where that was in the basement of the ad agency where I worked. And so maybe I learned it then, but yeah, people call it sur la table. So that's an example of a curse of knowledge of a foreign phrase. If something means something in Swahili, and you're not going to be there to explain it to people. And then also if it's just foreign, being unfamiliar. Also, yeah, ambiguity. I'm just going to jump back to annoying for a bit. There's a lingerie company called Third Love, and the founder said that she likes the name is ambiguous. Nothing about your business should be ambiguous. Nothing. And I was appalled at that. Honestly, who says that? And every time I go speak and I show that example, especially if I'm speaking to students like at Stanford or another university, I'll say, what do you think Third Love is? And if you already know what it is, don't say anything. And people give the strangest answers. And they're always sexual, by the way. And none of them are a lingerie store. And yeah, where does Third Love come from? Sometimes I'm like, what happened? Did somebody own that domain name and they just decided oh, let's just make this our company name? I always try to dissect a name, how did this come to be? So yeah, that's curse of knowledge. And then finally, the H in S.M.I.L.E stands for hard to pronounce. Don't make your name difficult for people to pronounce. No one wants to embarrass themselves pronouncing your name. Think of a time you've been in a foreign restaurant and there was something on the menu that you wanted to order. You could tell based on the description, but you couldn't pronounce the name of the dish. So either you didn't order it or you pointed to your menu when the waiter came by, or you attempted to pronounce it and completely embarrassed yourself in front of your client that you were with, your spouse, anyone that your table mates. What if you were at a big client dinner and that happened? And salad niçoise, right? That's all French, I butcher, but I'm sure everyone calls it salad not everyone, but Nicoise.
Well,
That's what it looks
Nicole,
like.
yeah. I think that's what I originally called it. And then my husband, who knows French, he's like, no, that's not right. I'm like,
Yeah, but like, how would you know that, right?
yeah,
So, yeah, French is the one language I just get really hung up on. And so, yeah, you don't want your name to be hard to pronounce. There's a chocolate company and it's spelled TCHO. And people pronounce it Cho. People pronounce it TCHO, which is what I call capital punishment because their logo is all capital letters. And if you have a short word that's in all capital letters, people will pronounce it
yep,
just letter by letter, like THX. So yeah, TCHO, and it's pronounced Cho, and it's the T is silent. But like, how would you know that? And like, you wouldn't know it was a chocolate company. And also, if you were having a phone conversation with someone and they were coming to San Francisco when I lived there, people would come and say they wanted to check out some local chocolatiers. And if I said, oh, make sure you go to Cho, how would they know it was spelled TCHO? Right? So
sure.
you have to think about that too. When somebody's hearing it, what are they hearing? And as that goes back to spelling, is it spelled the way it sounds? But yeah, your name should only be able to be pronounced one way. Otherwise, it's going to sound like three different brands. Like if there's a brand of like green protein, like vegetarian, like you put in your smoothies. I think it's vegan or vegetarian, and it's VEGA.
Hmm.
So it can be pronounced Vega, like vegetarian, Vega, like vegan, or Vega, like the car from the 70s. My friend Janice is telling me about, oh, this great protein powder she adds to her green drink called Vega. And someone else is telling me about Vega, and someone else is telling me about Veja. I might not realize it's all the same product.
Yep. And how should you be taking into account, like, if you're in another country and you're selling in other countries, like, how does the naming convention impact that type of, in that culture? How do you think about that when you're coming up for something that it's more global versus just in the US?
Yeah, we work with translation service companies. So if someone is going global, we'll do disaster checks to make sure the name doesn't mean something bad in a foreign
Yep.
language. I mean, we've all heard horror stories of things that have happened. They're not all true. The Chevy Vega one is pretty much an urban legend. But yeah, I don't think bad things have happened. And then you don't want to do it like, oh, my friend speaks Japanese, I'll just ask them. No, you can't just run it by one person. And you should probably run it through some professional linguist because they might see things that, this is what they do for a living. And it's not super expensive to do, but I do recommend doing it if you are going global.
Yeah. So, Alexandra, this has been absolutely delightful, and you give us so many good examples and advice and everything. But if someone is trying to name their product, their service, the company, or whatever it is, what is the one thing that you would tell them that they can do in the next, month or so to get them closer to actually having a good name for what they're trying to name it?
Well, try some of the techniques that I talked about, like, looking at stock photo libraries or going to a thesaurus or a rhyming dictionary. I'll just give a quick example with rhyming dictionary, naming a blow dry bar that we eventually named Bounce. You bounce in, bounce out, get some bounce in your hair. So yeah,
Hmm.
it's a couple blow dry bars. But we were naming when I was coming up with names, I put the word blow into a rhyming dictionary. It sorts them by syllables. So, one syllable, two syllables. So I got down to chateau. I'm like, chateau blow. That's perfect. It's like, it's fun. It's whimsical. It sounds like a house, like a place you would go. The client wanted like a really opulent interior, like with royalty and everything. It just worked out really well. But the merchant association didn't like the name. So so Chateau Blows. Yeah, there's always a story like that. I have so many stories like that, like the one that got away. Or like the runner-up name. I could write a book just on the runner-up names, or the ones that like almost like that never saw the light of day that were so good. Yeah, lots of those.
I hope that is your next book because I would definitely read it. That's for sure. Alexandra, where can people find you?
At eatmywords.com, and on our website, you can take the Smile and Scratch test for free. Just click on test a name. And I'm on LinkedIn at Alexandra Watkins. My email, alexandra@eatmywords.com.
And I'm going to put all of these in the show notes too. So if you didn't catch that, you can go take a look at show notes. Thanks so much, Alexandra.
Thank you.